Sam LaPrade. Welcome to the Capacity Building Institute monthly webinar. Today's topic, I am so excited. I cannot wait to introduce our guest speaker for today as well. Such an important topic, and I know many of you are coming in sometimes from all over Canada, sometimes from all over the world. I always love to see where people are joining us from. I'm coming to you from Ottawa and, of course, Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, unceded and unsurrendered lands of the Algonquin people. I'm so excited to be here. I would love to know where you're coming from today. We're just getting started. If you want, I love seeing in the chat where you're joining us, so feel free to include that. And Hannah's prompting everybody there to get started today. We're going to be talking about really a lot of trends, especially when it comes to staffing in the nonprofit sector today. A really important topic. Like I said, I've got lots of ideas on this myself, but I really want to hear from our guest speaker today. And I think it's going to be a really nice, robust discussion. So get comfy, get your favorite drink. We're going to spend some time with Addie today from the CBI, from the Capacity Building Institute. And Addie's going to guide us a little bit as we get started today. Judy's joining us from Vancouver Island today. It's wonderful to have Judy here, and Marianne joining us from London, Ontario. And we appreciate them sharing where they're coming in from. Addie, I'm turning it over to you. Is that okay? You're ready to go, my friend?
Yep.
Excellent. I'll be back in a minute. Thanks, Addie.
No worries. All right. So, hello, everyone. My name's Addie, or Aditi, and I am the Outreach and Engagement Coordinator at Capacity Building Institute, or CBI. So, Capacity Building Institute is a not-for-profit organization that is under the umbrella of Sustainable Capacity Solutions. And we provide training, coaching, and mentorship to support staff and volunteers in the environmental nonprofit sector across Canada. So our mission is to provide equal opportunity and access to capacity building training for every small shop nonprofit and environmental leaders across Canada. And we do this through 6 main themes. So they are financial management, fund development, governance and board development, volunteer engagement and human resources, communications and outreach, risk management and legal issues, and leadership and organization culture. So these themes are present within all the different programs that we offer. We're currently offering 3 different programs. So the Capacity Building Webinar Series, which is a free monthly webinar, as the one you're attending today. And in these webinars, we have a number of different speakers and leaders in the nonprofit sector that come in to discuss a variety of different topics. Our next webinar is going to be for corporate funding. So you can come directly ask your questions to funders, and that will be on November 27th from 4 to 5 p.m. We also have our flagship program, which is the Capacity Building Certificate Program. And this is a boot camp for executives and senior staff members in the Canadian environmental profit sector. So this program has 6 different module-based trainings, and it's based on the 6 themes that I mentioned earlier. And then lastly, we have our Youth Intern Training Program, which is a skills development and training program for youth between the ages of 18 and 30. And this is the perfect opportunity for young professionals who are just looking to get to know the sector a little bit better and also learn more about it. And our winter training program applications actually just opened. So we have a few sponsored spots available for youth in Ontario, Atlantic, and northern regions of Canada. I'll have the link to the applications in the chat if you guys are interested, but you can also scan the QR code to apply directly. I am currently participating in this program right now, and I've gained a lot of really valuable skills, including grant writing, and I think I've learned a lot about the sector, so I highly encourage you to apply today, as sponsored seats are limited. Moreover, if you're not for profit who could benefit from having an intern or volunteer, or you currently have a youth staff member who you think could benefit from the training, you could also apply as an employer. So this is a really great way to bridge the gap between your capacity while also providing the opportunity for youth like myself to gain more experience. So we have actually a number of different trainers that we work with. So we have Sam, who is hosting the webinar today. We also have Rob Barnes, who's worked in the sector for over 10 years. Barb King, who has 20 plus years of extensive management experience in the sector. Alex Keegan, who provides training and consultations on communication strategies. And Dwayne Taylor, who has helped nonprofits for over a decade. So all of them have different specialties and a lot of experience in the sector. Lastly, we run a number of different programs and support over 150 different organizations across Canada, which would not be possible without our funders and supporters. So big thank you to all our funders and supporters for allowing us to deliver programs like this webinar. Before we get into today's webinar, here's the contact information. So if you have any questions or are interested in the programs, you can reach out directly to Hannah and I. And I can also put all this information in the chat if that's easier. We also have very exciting webinars lined up for the end of the year. So like I mentioned earlier, we have our November webinar, which is with corporate funding. So we'll have 2 corporate funders come in and you can directly ask them questions like how they do their granting, etc. And in December, we'll be having the BIPOC Fellowship come in to talk about the importance of diverse leadership. And you can hear directly from BIPOC leaders. So all of this information, reminders to our webinar, updates on community events can all, and more, are also available through our newsletter so that you can sign up for through the QR code there. And also I'll put in the chat. And I'll turn it back over to Sam.
Wonderfully done, Addie. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very, very much. We have lots to get to today, and I don't want to waste 1 second. I want to introduce our special guest speaker today, and that is Mary Barrell. She's the president and general counsel for Charity Village. Mary Barrell, where are you, my friend? There you are. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
I am so excited. We have about 53 minutes, Mary, and I think we could probably talk for 53 hours about this topic. So first of all, I want to find out a little bit about you. Give us a little bit about your background.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I have a common background as to you, Sam. I understand. I started off being a journalist in broadcast news and worked for CTV affiliates, and CBC was my last role before becoming a lawyer. And I went into law, studied law, and began working in the media and entertainment sector of practice that both for you may remember certain corporations that were Alliance Atlantis was where I started my career in Toronto, and then I started my own practice, and I worked in that area for some time. I became and appointed in 2013 as VP of Media Affairs and General Counsel to Charity Village, and then most recently I was appointed President and General Counsel. So that's I've been very pleased to be doing that just on the eve of the pandemic, in fact, and we went through a lot of crazy times in helping support the nonprofit sector in addressing, the many challenges that came their way during that very difficult time.
It was a very challenging time, and I need a nap after that resume, Mary. That's a big
I
resume.
guess it was a little bit too long, but in any case.
No, I didn't mean it that way. I meant that you've just done so much. Like it's impressive. I could listen to you all day. I think it's wonderful that you've got all this great experience. We're going to be diving into a really important topic that's important to both of us, and that is about the sector and the people behind the sector. And you mentioned the pandemic, Marion. I don't think that there was ever a more sort of important time than when the pandemic hit. Both the private sector and the government looked at the nonprofits and said, okay, solve this for us. And all the nonprofits were going home with Commodore 64s, and no volunteers had gone away, asked to do more with less. So talk to me about this last coming up on 5 years, what that's been like for this sector.
Well, it was quite an extraordinary time, I think. What we certainly saw from our perspective at Charity Village was that, this what was key was the capacity to be able to continue to deliver services and figure out a way to operate in a way, in ways that not many of the nonprofits and charities had ever worked before. So, their fundraising strategies had to go out the window. There was no more in-person sort of events. They had to figure out new ways and actually go extremely digital. They had to learn how to work with their teams being remotely or hybrid. Even to deliver services in a different way. So I think we saw this enormous change. And I must say, I think what happened was the good thing about the pandemic, if you can say that there's anything that was good that came from the pandemic, was the fact that, the nonprofit sector really came together, pulled together, were able to collaborate in ways that they'd never had before, and learn skills at a breakneck speed in order to be able to change the manner in which they serve their communities and their stakeholders, and really change the way that they operated at an extraordinary pace and delivered extraordinary services during that really difficult time. So I am really the other thing I think it did was it raised awareness of how important the not-for-profit sector is within our economy, but also just in terms of being, truly the substance of our society, like the foundation of our society, and how we help keep things moving and taking care of people and taking care of communities. So I think it was an extraordinary time. Certainly it was an extraordinary time to to take my role on as president during that period. But we're very proud to have, excuse me, I'm struggling with a bit of a cold. We were very proud to bring a whole lot of new digital services through Charity Village, including, a lot of e-learning training as well about helping the nonprofit sector to be able to learn to operate differently and to support in a lot of free services and information that we were able to provide during that time. So I'm very proud of the sector, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. And I think the Herculean capacity to be able to take on that enormous challenge and to be able to deliver the way it has was extraordinary.
Oh, absolutely. And Charity Village, I think, those that maybe haven't been connected, I can't imagine anyone in this country that hasn't been connected to Charity Village. But certainly you offer so much more than just posting of jobs. Like it's such a robust resource. One thing that I want to talk about, and you sort of touched on it a bit, is the burden of care. It's a lot of weight. I have a lot of friends that work in this sector, and you can literally feel the weight on their shoulders. Is this something that you're seeing as well, Mary?
Yeah, and I think you're touching on I think it was a very appropriate title to a report that came out recently that was commissioned and worked on and researched by Environics Institute and the Diversity Institute and Future Skills Center. That had an extraordinary capacity to be able to pull together a lot of data. So they surveyed 12,000 Canadians over a 4-year period. So it included pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and then post-pandemic data about the sector. And the title is Burden of Care, and because it was talking about the impact on the actual workers within the sector. They were able to drill down on some extraordinary sort of findings that are of concern to the nonprofit sector, and certainly for leaders of organizations about their workplaces, and the impact of the nature of the work, but also that incredibly difficult experience that workers in the nonprofit sector went through during the pandemic. And it's all about their capacity to have be satisfied in the workplace. And so we explored this in one of the podcasts that we did this year, because it's recent findings that are really, really significant, where they found that workers in the nonprofit sector had higher levels of dissatisfaction than workers in the public and private sector. And it was interesting because they were able to actually compare people in the nonprofit sector and their responses in comparison to both the public and private sector. And so the findings were really significant and quite disturbing. And it's really sort of a red flag that I think has to be of concern to any leaders about, how they should be thinking about their teams and supporting their workers within their organization.
Brilliant. I think it's, it's definitely been challenging. Anyone that's ever tried to recruit a position, particularly since the pandemic, there's that new layer of, of hybrid work or at-home work that's now been added on. Retention and of course recruitment. That's your game every single day. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing in the sector.
Well, I think that what we've seen is there's a challenge. Certainly, there's I would say there's three big challenges. The first being this problem of these findings that came out of, and I think there's a lot of nonprofits out there who will see their own workplaces in some of the survey results that found that the job satisfaction was higher and disturbingly high, given the fact that we're all motivated by wanting to do better and make change and making positive change. It's very troubling to discover that a lot of workers are feeling unhappy and dissatisfied and overworked and overburdened, and just again, the burden of care is really the essence of it. There's another trend that's going on too that is also a very serious challenge, and it's not a new one. It was identified in the Senate report from 2019, 5 years ago, about the fact that the nonprofit sector has not done a really great job of creating a succession plan within the organizations that serve it. So the challenge being that, of course, given what we all went through with the pandemic, everybody's attention was certainly not worrying about the succession, but really was to survive and be able to help and serve the communities that they're mandated to. But on the other hand, this was recognized some time ago, pre-pandemic, that there was a real issue with the nonprofit workplace being dominated, particularly in the leadership level, of people that were my age. And, certainly boomers are what was recognized as a real serious problem at that time was actually turned into a full-blown crisis during the pandemic, because as you're aware, a lot of boomer leaders took early retirement. They left. And so people had to do with having fewer leaders there. And also, because there was no succession plan in place. Succession plan is an expensive and difficult thing to put together, and it takes time, and it also is a challenge, because succession plan assumes that you have somebody that you're mentoring up and bringing into the leadership sort of space in order to be able to mentor and carry them on and groom them to become a leader. And that's often a challenge, because organizations are way too busy trying to actually serve the communities that they do, and also they just don't have the resources and the revenue and the income to be able to afford to have a person in waiting, if you understand my point. And that's certainly what we heard from the experts. And the challenge being now that there's statistics out there that are saying that for every 100 people that are coming into the workforce, 40 are leaving in another decade. So it's a real challenge, because it's just a demographic shift that's going to be enormously impactful on the sector that leaders have to address and grapple with.
For
And
sure.
I guess the third trend that we're seeing is, it's especially become more impactful now because of the challenge of the cost of living and housing, et cetera, that it's become more difficult to actually be able to attract young talent to the sector. There's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot more sort of economic and financial struggles that young people are dealing with today than they had previously in terms of housing and such like. And so, their paycheck makes a difference at those foundational years of their career. And so the usual kind of attraction for anybody is, join the nonprofit and charitable sector to do good, to be able to embrace your passion and do good in the world. And that's really an important principle, an important, I guess, an advantage in a way in terms of being messaging to attract people to do that. But in the context of an environment where the economy is really struggling and where people are struggling to make ends meet, it's tougher, especially when the vast majority of nonprofits cannot pay the same salaries that are paid in the private and public sector. So yeah, there's a real challenge with that. And also, the other thing that we're hearing anecdotally from the experts that I interviewed for my podcast on this topic was that, young people are in nonprofits and they're often actually seeing their leaders and their managers burnt out and tired and working really hard. And so they're just sort of saying it's not for me. And by the way, I have to pay for rent. And so it's getting to be tougher to attract young people to the sector. And the interesting thing about that is, of course, attracting young people is to the sector and for careers in the sector, really part of the solution of both the capacity, the issues around dissatisfaction at work, bringing people in that are enthusiastic, that can take on those roles and learn and become part of the team, as well as this whole succession crisis is only going to be in the long term addressed by being able to attract young people to the sector. So those are the three big trends that we're seeing that's happening now, but also on the horizon will continue until we figure out solutions that can address some of these issues.
Yeah, beautifully summarized. I think a lot of people on the call today would certainly agree with many of those sentiments. And when you think about attracting people to this sector, you mentioned the wages, benefits as well. That type of work that they're doing. A lot of young people are having to have a second job. So I know when I started in the sector, Marion, I mean, I'm talking about a long time ago, but if the work week was 40 hours, sometimes I was putting in 50 or 55 hours because I wanted to get ahead. But young people today have another position. They may not be able to do that. So they're kind of staying at a level and a lot of transitions over, staying somewhere 18 months and going somewhere else for 18 months. That's not sustainable in the sector either. Would you agree?
Yeah, in fact, it's a real challenge because, it goes back to the economy. A lot of nonprofits can't afford to pay a full-time salary and benefits and all the things that would keep somebody there. So, there's a lot of precarious work in the sector. And, of course, and it's very frustrating and kind of breaks your heart that there's so many people that want to do good and want to make a difference, and that's why they're there and they're prepared to take less money, but at the same time, they don't even have job security. They don't have benefits. They're working part-time, and so I think these are really significant systemic problems that have to be overcome, or for the benefit of not just the sector but also all the people that depend on it.
And you mentioned succession a little bit earlier, and boy, oh boy, I mean, if there's one sort of topic I get called to talk about a lot, is, boards that go, oh my gosh, our ED is leaving in 6 months and
Yeah.
we don't know what we're going to do. And, the ED has, in most cases, brought it up a couple of years earlier and said, here's my sort of my time. And then it kind of hits. And as you know, more than anybody, to sort of find the right person takes a lot of time. So that succession planning, and there's one thing to be a founder of an organization, that's a whole other level. But to be an executive director that's maybe been there 10, 15 years, and to see this kind of change, do you find people are looking for a different skill set? Are they looking outside of the nonprofit sector? Maybe somebody that was in business. Are we becoming a bit more creative filling those positions?
Well, I think what happens is, I mean, certainly there's a lot to address your point. There's certainly a lot of organizations and boards who, frankly, that take the attitude that let's not fix what's not broke. And they've often had leaders in position for a long time, and everybody knows that it's going to be a daunting challenge to try and put somebody into those shoes. And so it tends to be delayed, is what I'm hearing from experts that work in this area. And of course, then when the time comes and somebody's leaving through the door, they literally need to go outside to look for expertise. And that's not easy, and it's a longer process than most people tend to think it is, especially for in a leadership position. And really, there's also competition for those people as well. It's being able to make it an appealing sort of package. That being said, if you're not looking for somebody younger, you're often going to be able to access potentially what we call sector shifters. So those are folks that might be taking early retirement in the private sector, that have these skills and have a lot of energy, and they don't want to be disconnected from the world in retirement. So they really want to engage, and they have these valuable skills that they can bring to the sector. And so organizations are welcoming those folks in, and we've always seen at Charity Village a lot of people that are coming in, or they've just given up because they don't like the private sector or their job, and they want to still have a purpose with a paycheck, and be involved and engaged with the world. And those folks come with a lot of expertise, a lot of problem-solving skills in a different context. Now, the challenge is there's such a different mindset in the nonprofit world than there is in the private sector, and so I think that fit is kind of complicated sometimes. And we encourage candidates to try and understand the nonprofit sector first, and many of them do because they've been volunteers or they've been sitting on boards or something to that effect. But I do think that there's some reluctance on the part of organizations and boards who are seeking the next leader. There's a little bit of hesitation, a little concern that they may not really fit because they're not of the same mindset. And in some cases that's probably true, but I think that nonprofits and charities can benefit from assuming that there's the right motivation and intentions behind the person who's interested in the role, that there's a lot of learning that can be done as well by organizations to be more efficient, more productive, and applying some innovative strategies from business into the kind of work that we do every day in the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, beautifully said. I think one of those that we've seen over the last 15, 20 years, I find, is data. Business was always so hot on data. And I found about 2 decades ago, the nonprofit world sort of looked at those databases and went, there's a lot of information in here that we could use the science of fundraising to then increase and enrich the art of fundraising. So I think a lot of that has happened over the last number of years as well, the influence of the business sector on our sector. I want to touch on founder syndrome because
Mm.
this is a thing. This is a whole thing.
No.
So for those that maybe aren't familiar with founder syndrome, I'll let you give your description.
Well, I would say it's kind of a derogatory term when it's used. It's really about somebody who have, they've founded a charity or a nonprofit. It's their passion. It's all of, and they've made it an extraordinary achievement in building what they have. But often, it's partly the board's relationship to the founder as well, because the founder may have been very instrumental in who's on the board. So the founder, it's like leaving your baby. It's very difficult to let it go and go out into the world and develop and become its own thing or somebody else's baby. And so that's the challenge. And it's really up to the board to have the responsibility to be able to address the succession question with the executive director or CEO, and do it early enough so it doesn't feel threatening, that this is an ongoing plan that can be worked together with the executive director and the board about what are the plans and what are the steps and how do you, once the succession occurs, or even how do you train that person and can that new person benefit from the ongoing presence of the departing leader in order to be able to properly make sure that that person is up to speed on all the important issues that the nonprofit has to deal with, fits into the team, understands the rhythm, the culture, all of that. But the problem is, as we've talked about with the succession crisis, is that it's suddenly like, oh, they're leaving. What are we going to do now? And so that's why it's so important that even if you can't really mentor someone within to be able to groom them to take on the leadership role, if that's beyond the resources and the capacity of the organization, working with the board, I think it's important for the board to actually have those tough conversations and make sure that the executive director understands, even if they founded it, that if they're really committed to the ongoing sustainability of this organization, that they have to think past when that person will be there and start that discussion. But it really is a thing, and particularly, the vast majority of charities and nonprofits in Canada are very small, and so and there's a reluctance, I think, of many volunteer board members to take on that really tough job of talking to somebody who's given their whole life to a cause, and it's a very delicate conversation.
And in so many examples, they started because of a personal reason, right?
Exactly.
So it even adds another sort of emotional moment there. I want to talk about solutions. We've got some great questions, by the way, coming your way from our participants, which I'll share in a minute. So encouraging anybody that still wants to throw a question in the Q&A there, I'm happy to share those with Mary today. But can we talk a little bit about sort of this idea that there are some solutions. All hope is not lost, Mary. There are some things that we can do. So walk me through that, because you're a positive person. I know you are.
Okay, so which issue do you want to deal with?
Well, I think when it comes to the solution for succession problems, let's talk a little bit there, and then maybe overall in the sector.
So I think the first part is the board has to be thinking about this. It's their job actually to recruit and be able to make sure that the appropriate person is in place. That's one of their major responsibilities, of course, as you're aware. So the board has to be confronting this as their responsibility. The other thing is, if the leader, the CEO or executive director, has to be in a position, should, if it's not occurring to them, then if it has suddenly occurred to them that they want to depart, making sure that they're providing enough information and enough lead time to the board to be able to start the process of actually doing some recruitment, unless you have somebody that you're bringing up through your organization. Now, during that time, so the true long-term solution is to actually have a succession plan. And but in the event that you don't have one, and we know that we've got all these boomers that are going to be departing, so what do you do in the interim? Well, if your only option is to bring somebody from the outside and go and recruit a leader from elsewhere, but that takes time. It's a whole, you have to plan what you need, figure out what the needs are even before you start creating that job description, figuring out what networks you're going to use and what professionals potentially you'll be using to help assist the board in finding and recruiting, and then of course all the interviews and the onboarding, and that is a long process. So the experts that I spoke to suggested, well, there are things you can do in the interim. So in that transition period, you can have what they call interim leaders. So hiring somebody that has skill sets that you can use to come in for short periods of time, what that transition period to cover that off. So 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it might be. The other thing potentially that we're seeing and that I'm hearing about is that in the event you can't find a leader, or there's just not the right fit, you can't get somebody that's is what you feel is appropriate, and you don't have the resources to attract the kind of one that you think you need. They're seeing mergers and some amalgamations between nonprofits. So you have a similar mission, you're potentially co-located or at least within a region, and sharing those leadership roles between those organizations. That's apparently happening, which I think is a fascinating sort of way of addressing that. And then, of course, you can figure out whether or not somebody who would be a sector shifter, whether there's a way of bringing in somebody from the private sector or from the public sector to bring on that role. And so those are kind of the interim solutions to that succession challenge in the short term. Long term, though, really is to be communicating between the board and the executive director, be planning, from now, even if the person isn't leaving for a decade, because you're going to have to figure out, okay, what will the needs be in the future? Because that's the needs in the future. Your existing leader may not have the same capacity or the qualifications to meet the needs that you're likely going to need in the future.
True. Yeah.
So the more you can start talking between the board and the executive director, having those respectful, open conversations about the challenges and the needs as soon as possible, and keeping that going, I think allows for better planning. And then, looking around in terms of offering the opportunity of potentially bringing somebody up internally, if you have the capacity to do that, it's really about letting them see, because, you have somebody in middle management who's going, well, he's never going to, or he or she is never going to leave. I'll always be stuck here. And you have really good potential leaders that might depart the organization because they don't see a career path up to leadership. And so you have to also reach out to those persons within your organization and show them that, yes, there is a career path, and can keep them engaged by developing the skills that you think that they will need in the future if they're the right person that you think would be appropriate for eventually leading the organization. Make sure if you've got a gem not to lose them, so I think the communication has to go both directions, up and down between the executive director and the board, and then internally the executive director and whomever that they see on their team that has real promise to and communicating the fact that you as executive director are not going to be there forever, and that letting them envision the fact that they might actually have an opportunity to really lead.
Yeah, let them dream the dream, Mary. Let them dream.
Yeah.
Which is always good. I love when you see somebody that, has kind of come up through the ranks. And then I know somebody, for instance, that used to attend a Boys and Girls Club, and now they're the CEO. Like, I love that. They had all these different steps to get there, and I think it's brilliant. I do want to touch on the second question. I know I threw a lot at you there. Just that overall job dissatisfaction, and trying to see what we can do there. There are some things we can do in the sector. I know a lot of people ask for hybrid work. A lot of people say, listen, I know you can't pay me anymore, but can I get the week between Christmas and New Year's off? Or like, there's all sorts of different ways to try and keep those employees, those gems, as you spoke about, satisfied. We have a couple of minutes, and then we're going to jump to some of the participant questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think, well, in some instances, you're not going to be able to pay them more. And, obviously money counts, especially in this kind of economy where things are tough. So a lot of organizations may not have that capacity to be able to do that. So, but there's other ways that we can, help improve the culture. Giving more people more flexible hours, potentially, if they have childcare needs or they have other responsibilities, seeing if there's ways that you can adapt your hours to be more flexible for them. Maybe there's a way of figuring out whether your benefits package can be improved that's within your budget. Giving people a chance to get professional development, if you're able to invest in that. So that they're getting more engagement and being involved in, they're seeing that they're benefiting in their career at the same time that they're working hard. So they're getting something back. Paying attention to the culture, the work culture of the organization. Do you have supports for people? You have a lot of burnt out people coming out of the pandemic. Do you have any plans or programs that you can offer to help with mental health? Do you have programs to just in terms of supporting those who may need a little bit of a respite in terms of being able to refocus on their work and their lives? So maybe you give them personal days. Maybe you can attract them with more vacation time. Just having and exploring new ways of working. So hybrid work models, being flexible and, having them come in part of the week versus the whole time. There's a lot of ways that you can build an attractive, engaging workplace that respects and supports people without spending a lot more money or
Right.
giving people huge promotions. The other really important thing that we heard in both these reports, as well as the attractor for young people, is a real commitment to diversity and inclusion. So it's a very attractive value to young people. But for people within the workplace, some of the things that came out of the Burden of Care report was real concern around people complaining of feeling that they've experienced discrimination or an insensitivity, racialized workers, people with disabilities. Having a commitment and showing your commitment to inclusion, accessibility, and equity in the workplace, I think can go a long way as well. So these are some of the things that to overcome this real job dissatisfaction that's out there without a huge investment in funds that you may not have.
And what I heard so much in that, Mary, is communication, right? Is having an open door, letting people communicate their needs, and also communicating with your team about what you can offer. I remember I was working so much. We had a big event coming up, and my daughter had a Christmas concert, and I needed to take, about 2.5 hours to get there, see the concert, and get back. And they were like, okay, well, you're going to take a half a day then, off your vacation.
Yeah.
but they also knew how much I was working and wasn't getting paid. So
Right.
it's that communication. And I was so resentful driving that car. I remember driving to the concert. Oh, I was so mad. And I'm thinking, you're not seeing the big picture here.
Right.
I
Right.
just spent the weekend working on, X, Y, and Z. Anyway, I just think it's communication is essential. We've got some great questions, so I want to get to them because sometimes the best questions come from our participants. We've got a great
Absolutely.
question from Judy. So here's what Judy writes. I am the ED who has given notice, willing to stay until they find my replacement and train. God love you, Judy. That's amazing, by
Yeah.
the way. I have to say that. Any tips on how you can share how to make the transition smooth for me, for the board, and for the new person? I just want to say before you answer this, Mary, that is such a question from someone in the nonprofit sector. She's thinking about the board, she's thinking about the new person, and I'm so glad she's thinking about herself because so often we forget about ourselves in that. So congratulations, Judy, on thinking about you too. She wants to add that she's been 18 years in the role. Once again, God bless you. And no internal candidates. So there's no internal candidates here. But Mary, I'm going to let you take this because this is such a great question.
It is, and I'm certainly no expert in this area at all. I mean, I learn everything that I'm talking about by speaking to experts. So I'm going to be passing on secondhand information. But I think the main thing to do would be to I think for your own self-interest, and I'm speaking to the ED, is set a time frame.
Mhm.
Don't leave it open because honestly, you're just way too valuable that as long as they can keep you there, they will. And, I just think that you should set parameters in terms of your time limit and then really communicate as to what the main, with the board, what the main sort of goals are in terms of the training and the transition. But also, I heard from a lot of the experts that I spoke to about this in the podcast that I dedicated to this topic, is that find out from the individual as well what they feel their needs are in terms of being able to craft a training and sort of onboarding that fits both needs. And make it smoother because you don't want to be at the end of the process of training them and then they still haven't been addressed their own personal sort of requirements in order to make that transition as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, brilliant. And I was going to say the same thing too. I'm not an expert at all, but certainly a length of time because they'll keep you there another couple of
Yeah,
years.
they will.
Toast. Mary Ann has a great question. How do we make it common for wages in the nonprofit sector to be higher? In a past organization, we went from 100% volunteer board to now having two full-time paid staff at a good salary. Why can't we demand better for staff? If services are cut, perhaps society will value the services more. It's often said that in nonprofit workers, i.e., the homelessness sector, we're one step away from being homeless themselves, which is awful. Boy, oh boy, there's so much in there, Mary. But I'm going to let you take a crack at sharing some thoughts on this one.
Well, I think, there has been for at least a decade, and ONN has done a lot of work on this in terms of both looking at the issues, but also providing sort of resources and tools about the decent work movement. And that's about, being making sure that organizations work towards and actually they now have a process where they can be certified that they are committed to providing fair wages, that they're committed to stable and productive work for people, that they see their workplace as a source of dignity and as part of the job and part of the values and culture of the place. That the other part is, of course, you have to think about communicating to your funders and also, to make it clear that, there's this sort of fiction, I think, that the less money that goes to administration means it's a more efficient use of donated funds. And we all know that what that means is that you have many fewer people doing so much more, and it's not necessarily more efficient. And I think there has to be an education of people understanding that this is what happens when you don't raise wages to a fair wage. It's a living wage, and people leave the sector. The community suffers, the Canadian society suffers as a result, because we simply can't be able to produce the kind of change we want to. So I think it's a combination of education of your own donors, individual donors, that how you spend that admin portion is actually, that's how you keep an effective, productive team. And as well as, I think we have to sort of look at, should we be lobbying for changes as to how we can use how a charitable organization can actually use funds, and in particular, should there be some changes in the guidelines and rules about how much can be paid to staff, because it's becoming unworkable when as some of these reports have shown, you have people in precarious work. They have to work by contract. They don't have a full-time position or benefits, and that to me is it's a real disgrace and a shame, because particularly given as we saw during the pandemic and continue to see the important work that charities and nonprofits do in our society, keeping it afloat and keeping communities afloat. So I think it's a real combination of ensuring that we lobby for it, that we communicate to our donors so that they understand what we're doing with that money, and ensuring that people feel good about donating to an organization that treats their people with a dignity and takes care of them and ensures that they're doing good work, and that they have the supports that they need to continue to deliver on the mission.
Yeah, for sure. I hear, when you were talking about that, I kept hearing Dan Pallotta. If you haven't watched Dan Pallotta's TED Talk, maybe our friend Hannah can throw it in the chat there for everybody. He's got a new movie out called Uncharitable. I think every board should be watching that TED Talk. It's about 20 minutes, 25 minutes long, and watching this movie Uncharitable. I know boards have gotten together to watch the movie together, to watch the TED Talk together. There's some great stuff in there in terms of, if you've got an organization that's got, and I referenced it at the beginning, Commodore 64s, and water's dripping on your staff's head, they're not going to be productive. Right. So you have to make an investment into them to be able to see that investment come out as well. We've got another great question here. This is from Addie. Hi, Addie. How can organizations support early professionals and help them attain the skills and knowledge needed for them to climb to leadership? I mean, I think about how I was supported to get my CFRE, for instance, right, and all the professional development. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Mary.
Well, I also, around the same time that I was vice president of Charity Village, I used to be president and CEO of Talent Egg, which focuses on young talent in Canada exclusively. And so we always did surveys with young people about what appealed to them in terms of joining an organization. And there was very interesting findings. They do, young people are passionate. They're passionate about things that they care about and social impact. And so we have some advantages in the not-for-profit sector in terms of attracting them. But once we get them there, we have to ensure that they are given, appeal to the young persons, what their needs are as well. Now, we can't always give them expensive professional development, but there's professional development that's out there that's available to be able to feel that give the sense that the young person is learning something while on the job that will develop their skills that they can take into their career beyond the job that they're in, or to climb up the organization's ladder. Also, ensuring that they feel, given the people I've spoken to that work with a lot of young people, especially those that they're trying to bring into the nonprofit sector, talk about how, don't make them go and pick up coffee. Don't just provide them with the role of, taking notes at a meeting. Those things like those beginner kind of kind of tasks in a job are, of course, need to be done. But at the same time, they're looking for opportunities to have some autonomy, to have a responsibility, to be able to also understand the impact that they're making in their job in doing what they're doing. And also, it doesn't have to be a formalized kind of training, but to offer relationships or an opportunity to develop relationships that are sort of a mentoring experience. So exposing them to more interesting sort of things than simply doing filing. You think back on those boring kind of jobs that we all had at the beginning of our careers, and how hard it was to stay awake, but and it's even harder to be enthusiastic. But really, just meeting them where they are and understanding that they have tons of talent and capacity and technological savvy that many of us don't have, that are so useful to our organizations. And I guess, being able to embrace them as a whole person, as opposed to, just being somebody who can help, an office helper, and giving them a little bit more of a feeling of responsibility within the organization, and trusting them with, and actually hearing, asking them what they think about various decisions, and asking them for the feedback.
We've got two great questions. We only have about 4 minutes. I want to get to both of them. One question, this might be a really quick one to answer.
Okay.
It's such an important one, though. Is there a movement in this sector to 4-day work weeks?
Oh, good question. I don't know, to be absolutely honest. We've certainly seen that there's a movement in the private sector. We've also seen that there's been pushback, in that space. I think that there could be really flexible, interesting ways of getting really good talent by sharing talent. So, even you might even be going for folks that would work 3 days a week and somebody else do the other 2, and or somehow splitting jobs if they're interested in not having a full-time job, but actually to being able to participate in the workforce. Could be a very interesting way to address that. But I'm not certain, but I imagine that there's a lot of people that want it. I'm just not certain whether we're going to be able to adapt to it in a practical way.
Yeah, no, fair enough. One other question. Oh, yeah, here it is. This is from Mary Elizabeth. And her question is, do you feel the increase in social enterprise may have added to the competitive labor market?
Yes, it has. And I've heard that from other folks that are in the recruitment space. Interestingly, because they're able to, in some instances, in many instances, they're able to offer a higher wage while still having that, I'm passionate about and giving back to the world kind of social impact sort of passion point that is particularly important. So they do compete. Yes.
Yeah. And it is that beautiful way of working, because it's kind of a hybrid as well, right? So I mean, it is wonderful. When I said I could speak to you for 53 hours, I would love another 52. Put it that way. I've really enjoyed our chat. I'm hoping we get to chat again. I know that you can tell by the questions too, and the engagement today, that others got much out of it as well, Mary. So thank you for your leadership in the sector. And for your frankness today about the sector. It's going through, some people have called it a rough adolescence. But I do think at the end of the day, there are some incredible people doing some wonderful work, and Charity Village is a leader among them. So thank you so much.
Well, it's been my great pleasure, and I can't tell you what an honor it is to be working in the nonprofit sector. I think it's the best untold story in Canada. It's a fantastic part of our community and our society, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, Sam. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah. It was a pleasure. We'll stay in touch for sure. We're getting lots of thank yous in the chat. So there you go. Just feel all the love, Mary. Feel all the love to Addie, and to, of course, Hannah Rockburn. Hannah Rockburn is our glue every single month. She keeps us going. So thank you so much, Hannah, for everything. Addie, thank you for your commitment as well today and your contribution. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. We look forward to the chat in November about corporate fundraising. Oh, I've got lots of questions for that one. I know you will as well. We'll see you in November, everybody. I'm Sam LaPrade, and this is the Capacity